to Women Making Moves, where we celebrate the moves that women are making. My name is Amy Pons, founder of Unlock the Magic, Coaching, Healing, and Marketing. I'm joined today with Rachael Lorenzo. Rachael Lorenzo, Mescalero, Apache Laguna Pueblo Xicana, is a queer, non-binary parent of two and lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico. They were born in Las Cruces, New Mexico, to young parents and were raised on their father's ancestral land in Laguna, New Mexico. Rachael graduated with a BA in political science and a master's in public administration, focusing on public health. Both degrees are from the University of New Mexico. Rachael studied political campaigns, participated in policy analyses, and has been consulted for their expertise in public health policies that could impact Indigenous communities. Rachael was not only raised on traditional values, but also on politics. Throughout their academic career, Rachael volunteered for political campaigns ranging from city council elections to presidential campaigns. Rachael was selected as a fellow for President Barack Obama's 2012 re-election campaign, Obama for America. Currently, Rachael funds abortion through an Indigenous-led reproductive justice organization, Indigenous Women Rising, and serves as Assistant Commissioner of Cultural Resources at the New Mexico State Land Office. In their spare time, Rachael writes short stories and poems, is a photographer, and tries to adopt cats without their husband finding out. Rachael, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I'm laughing so hard at that last line because I adopted a dog without telling my husband.
Oh my gosh.
It was over pandemic when I had a lot of wine by myself, and I decided that heading into the pandemic, we were going to adopt another dog because we have one. And I didn't tell him until later. And I was like, hey, I did something. He was understandably upset. And the next day, I drove down to Tennessee to pick up our new dog.
Oh.
And she has been the best blessing to our home and has really rounded out the four of us as a family. So it all is amazing. And
it worked out. And he was unhappy at first.
I wouldn't necessarily recommend that for marriages.
No.
But it was, again, yeah, to your point. I'm an energy healer, so I trust all energy and intuition. And back then, I wasn't as in tune, but I just knew it. I saw her. I was like, oh, that's our dog. How's your day? How's your heart?
Today is pretty good. I had a bout of what I think is food poisoning or bad vibes. So I got really sick yesterday and slept from noon until 7:30 this morning. Wow. Noon yesterday. And now I'm coming off of it. So
whoa.
Functional.
So feeling energy.
Yeah.
I always say, I don't know if this lands with you, but I'm like, of course, as humans, we get sick. Yes. Germs, science, all that. And sometimes energy makes us sick. You know, like it connects to something in us that needs to be purged. So
I grew up very traditional in my Pueblo traditions and a little bit in my Apache traditions. But yeah, I very much believe that not taking care of yourself and always harboring negative feelings and emotions and not doing what you can to like heal that can also transfer to other people. And I feel in my gut that someone where I was putting off something.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Rachael, specifically, I'd love to get your thoughts on something that I've been trying to land and articulate through my newsletter. The revolution that we've come upon right now is different this time, more energetic and spiritual. Do you agree with that?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
No, because at least from my perspective as an Indigenous person, politically, socially, my people have been living through, frankly, an apocalypse since 1492. Having our family structures, our traditions, being forcibly relocated for many Native communities, losing our language, which is very much tied to our land and where we come from and our creation stories. There aren't words, I think, in English that can really describe the pain that we feel generationally of like grief and loss when we think about what could have been. And so when I reflect back on my ancestors, my traditions, how much was lost and how much I'm so lucky to still have left, like we've always been in a revolution. There was the Pueblo Revolt of 1680, where Pueblos and some Apaches came together and fought back against the Spanish in New Mexico and were able to drive out the Spanish for over a decade and assert militaristic and political and social power where it should have rightfully been. And so I also feel like more people, more non-native people are starting to wake up to that because tribal leadership throughout the country and native folks have been saying for centuries, for decades, like take a look at what's happening, what has happened. The federal government has been doing this and doing it under a Democrat and a Republican. Like for tribal sovereignty, what it means for us to protect our land and our culture, political party doesn't matter as much as it does for non-native folks because we still don't have our land. We still have to ask permission to fix our pipes and fix our roads. We still have to get permission from the federal government. We're considered wards of the federal government. And now more non-native folks are starting to experience what that feels like and what that experience is. And so, yes, I agree. And no, I don't agree.
You're like, yo, we've been doing this. So let me take a step back for myself personally, since we're lovingly first meeting. I used to be an amazing white feminist, and I was in corporate, autopilot, copy paste, only knew what was told to me, etc. Since then, when I pivoted and I realized all of my unique gifts and abilities, literally, I move energy. That's my superpower. And something never felt right. I'm Indigenous European. No one that has been making decisions about this land was here first. Like I always say, like Christopher Columbus sure did find something, land that was already inhabited.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for sharing your perspective on that. You're like, yes, and from my standpoint, and this is why I reached out and wanted to meet with you, I want to learn more about returning to the land. I know that I live on land that was primarily Peoria. That's my first ask always for people to understand. It's like, go back to the land. Whose land were you on? Start giving thanks and gratitude and offerings to the people that were here first. And it's a hard thing because I feel like I'm not at home. Yeah, I was born and raised here, but like this isn't mine.
I think you're spot on. Yesterday, was it yesterday? Or maybe it was the day before. I was actually having a really good conversation with a friend about a guest lecture that I gave to the American Medical Student Association to medical students who are on the reproductive health track. That like reproductive health is what they want to focus on as MDs. And the facilitator asked, what is the group of people you think need like the most healing, that need the most work? And I said, white people, especially white men. I refuse to believe that white men in particular came from communities or traditions where it was acceptable to disregard women and trans and queer folks' power socially and politically, to disregard the power of children and the role that children have in their societies, even in Europe, that white folks who are here and who have left Europe, like there is very little to no culture that's left, and it makes me sad for white people, frankly, because I really feel like if there was still some connection to your ancestral land, to your language, to your culture, that there would be more fulfillment and there would be more empathy with indigenous people here in the so-called United States, that we're losing our language and our ways of life, but we're trying really hard to hang on to what's left. And so I think if especially white men took the time to take care of themselves, therapy, letting go of power, allowing themselves to be tender and figure out where they came from, I really think there would be less violence in the world. I really think that communities, I think families would be a lot safer. And we see this within our own Native communities, especially with Native men. We do have, unfortunately, incredibly high rates of sexual assault, missing and murdered Indigenous people. The roles of the various genders in our tribal communities having been lost, and Christianity and the federal government telling us like the way that we experience gender and parenthood and the way that we create our families, space our children, all of those things is wrong, really helped create a generation of folks who are not only disconnected from culture and tradition, but also from the children that they brought into the world. And I'm thinking of the Indian boarding school era where children were forcibly taken away from their families and put into boarding schools where they were, forced to learn English and made to cut their hair and they weren't allowed to go home. And many of the children who kept running away died trying to get back home. There's a really incredible podcast from CBC up in Canada that did a deep dive on the 60 scoop and First Nations folks who were in that same position where they were taken to boarding schools and separated from their families. And I don't think those things would have happened if white folks could, especially white men, have more empathy. I think it's really white men in particular that really need to take care of themselves because they do hold a lot of political and social power. Look at who is in Congress, who's in the White House. It's older white men who cannot relate, who were born into wealth or came into wealth because of their political pool. And if they just connected more to where they came from, I really think they would make different decisions. My opinion, frankly, is that the United States government should be abolished. It should have never existed. But we're here now, and the reality is things are getting more violent. And, the climate is getting worse. Climate change is getting worse and it's getting worse faster. And it's because of extraction, it's because of the lack of regard for women and children and the air that we breathe and the fact that Native people and low income Black folks, low income white folks, especially in the South, are experiencing the results of climate change, whether it's Black folks in Cancer Alley in Louisiana, where there's a lot of mineral extraction happening, or in the Four Corners area where Navajo folks are experiencing high rates of reproductive cancers and bad air quality. And it all boils down to white men feeling the need to extract and take and take and take in order to feel and be more financially and politically and socially powerful at the expense of other people who don't look like them.
And the reality is Gaia will restore
Mm-hmm.
no matter what we do.
Exactly.
And so, and when I say that, for those who don't know Gaia, Mother Earth, nature is the ultimate playbook. Like nature isn't involved in like what we want or like what any humans want. So she will restore. So thank you for sharing your perspective around what I shared, my view on the energetic and spiritual revolution. The reason I say that is because something that you said really resonated and landed with me is that what if we just allowed all of this to unfold? And that's not suggesting I want humans to be harmed. It's that something that connected for me that you said, which is it's going to have to get that bad for non-Indigenous people. I feel we're at a space in time where it's going to have to get that bad, quote unquote, on a physical realm for people to be like, oh, wait, oh, we've been doing something that is impacting us. Yeah, yeah, for a lot of years. So what I mean by this revolution right now is like the action, the quote unquote action is a little bit harder because the current administration is not interested in following law and order. So everyone can be like, fight back, protest, launch lawsuits. They don't care. They don't care. So what I mean by this energetic and spiritual revolution is that the same way that you felt bad vibes and that transfers from person to person, what I'm out here doing, leading, facilitating is healing all of my stuff from my learned experience, lived experience from my lineage so that I can help other people heal and kind of get back to what you were saying, healing themselves. And so beautifully, my guides, I asked them this morning, am I on the track to work with white men? My guides validated it through you, saying that white men are actually the ones that need to heal the most. So I'm going to be sitting with that and receiving that. Thank you for that beautiful gift. Thank you, guides. Thank you. Thus far, I've been like, I'm only helping women. Well, what if I could stand in my divine feminine goddess and show the men that are wounded masculine or imbalanced masculine the way to welcome in divine feminine and balance within themselves, right? So thank you for that.
Yeah.
So white is not a culture.
I don't know. I mean, when people say like, "Oh, I have connections to like the Irish or or to Dutch or
Yeah.
whatever. I always think of that and cultural appropriation of Native people. Like, okay, you don't know your own culture, so you have to appropriate ours. You want the beauty of my culture, but you don't want the struggle. You don't want the balance. You only want the good stuff, the beautiful things. You don't want the racism and sexism and all of those things along, you know, experiencing those makes it even more important for us to hang on to our culture and the beauty that especially non-native people can appreciate, right? And I don't know about white people like as a whole having a culture.
White culture has been actually conquering,
Right.
and I don't personally align with that because
I
you're holding power over another human or system or nature.
Yeah, when people say culture, I think culture can vary based on people's definition of it. So white culture, I know what it means when people say like Laguna culture, Laguna Pueblo culture, or Pueblo culture, or the culture, the vibe in New Mexico. I know what that's like. But when I hear something referred to like white culture, and I think that can be applied to any group, right? Like Black folks in Chicago are not the same as Black folks in the Deep South,
Sure.
even though we have shared experiences, right? And same goes for any other group. So I don't know what is
Yeah.
sure.
I don't either. And Rachel, honestly, that's where I've gotten to this place where I'm like, wait, what's my culture? I feel a yearning for that. So I've been looking more like deeply into the specific origins or regions that like my blood runs from.
Mhm.
And I've always felt called to that part of the world geographically, and I didn't know why. Now I'm starting to understand it. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think if someone is really in tune with who they are, or at least being open to learning who they are, you'll always be called to where you do come from. I think that's human nature, and I think it's absolutely a one of the ways that people can heal themselves and heal future generations and where they are in the present is by using where you come from and trying to understand and knowing that the answers to a lot of problems or issues that one faces, the solutions can come from where you come from.
Yeah. And we're in this really interesting time. I'm curious your thoughts. I've talked to a couple Indigenous First Nation folks that are like, do you really want to pull at that thread of immigration? Because how far back do we go?
Mhm.
Y'all weren't here. Is that like a weird irony something?
Oh, absolutely. Immigration policy is BS for sure. Borders are not real. Anyone who migrates to the United States from Central and South America, that is their ancestral right. That is part of what we call reproductive sovereignty, is the ability to migrate, which is part of what we call reproductive sovereignty. It was the ability to migrate in order to take care of your family. And migration has always been a part of Indigenous people's culture, certainly a part of my cultures. My Apache ancestors were very nomadic until the late 1860s and 70s. They were definitely split apart and made to go to different like military forts. Pueblo people, some of our stories include relatives from South America. We use a lot of parrot feathers and seashells, which of course you can't find in New Mexico. We're landlocked and it's a dry desert and it's a high elevation. So that just goes to show like migration has always been a part of of human history, no matter where you are in the world. And so thinking about immigration today and just how, yeah, it is ironic. Why are we wanting to ban people who it's in their blood to migrate and then coming from mostly white folks who aren't even from here, whose lineage is not from here?
This is where I get spicy, and I'm not trying to be a white savior, but it just like, really? Like, y'all. So let me center. In this space and time, and thank you so much for sharing your perspective. Reproductive sovereignty is not a term I was familiar with. So thank you for sharing that. Typically, a question I would ask is like, what are the moves you're excited to be making right now? Do you feel excitement about where we're headed? again, I'm always trusting in through my awakening. I have direct lines to the universe and to my guides, and I've gotten a hit. Oh, oh, he's supposed to come in and create all of this like chaos, and not saying I support it or agree with it. I'm saying like it, but it's all unfolding as it should. I keep getting that reminder through my energy field. So, on any given basis, especially from your perspective as an Indigenous First Nation person, and also your specific rights as a human from a federal level are under attack, how are you feeling about the moves that you're making through both Indigenous Women Rising, but also as a First Nation person?
Yeah. So real quick, I'm not First Nations.
Oh,
First Nations is usually like for Canadian, like
oh,
folks who live in so-called Canada.
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So you
Um,
go by Indigenous.
yeah,
Okay.
Indigenous or native. Yeah, I'm actually very excited. I'm excited because the organization went through some weird turmoil last year, and now we have a really solid team of 100% Indigenous folks, where we had some non-natives on staff, and there was just like a disconnect almost with cultural values and how they show up in the workplace. And it's really important to me that on my own land and founding and running a native-led org, that we incorporate our culture and our beliefs, and we include our non-native staff and board members, and make sure that we are very clear about what our values are and how we exercise those values. And now this year, we have 7 out of our 8 staff are Pueblo, and one is Indigenous from Mexico. And I'm really excited about the work that we're doing. We didn't do any civic engagement last fall. We are continuing to fund abortion, fund midwifery care. We're kind of having a blast at our New Mexico legislative session. So if folks go to our Instagram, we have a post that has a bunch of packets of gum, and it says abortion pills. And one Republican legislator misled her followers and her constituents because she left out the part in the bottom left corner that said sugar-free peppermint gum. And she was like, this organization is putting out free abortion pills all over the roundhouse. And I created a fun zine about my abortion story. And the cover has a cat on it that my daughter drew a few years ago. And it's called All Abortions Are Good. And the cat saying there's no such thing as a bad abortion. And someone was like, this is a death cult and they're giving out abortion pills all over. And so the message that we're trying to say is like, abortion pills are as safe as gum. I mean, it could be definitely more painful than swallowing gum, but they're safe. It's safer than Tylenol. It's safer than abortion pills. Abortion procedures are much safer than colonoscopies and a bunch of other procedures. And yet there's only one procedure, which is abortion care, in the whole wide world. Well, people will do anything to themselves to not be pregnant, to die by suicide, to ingest harmful chemicals, to insert harmful chemicals into the vagina, anything to not be pregnant. They'll harm themselves physically to not be pregnant. And so we are trying to make the case that abortion pills are safe, and we put it on a pack of gum, and it got all of the legislators all riled up, and it was a lot of fun. And so we just look forward to doing more fun stuff like that in order to educate people about the harm. We will never be quiet about the tactics that anti-abortion folks use, because it goes beyond abortion. It also goes into substance use testing without parental consent at the time of birth. It translates to doctors and nurses allowing their racial bias to show by calling in law enforcement because they're not culturally competent, and think that a Black parent or a Native parent are going to be bad parents and the baby shouldn't go home with them. Like, that still happens. And so yeah, we're having a ton of fun getting creative. We have an intergenerational staff. And so it's really awesome to have elders all the way down to young people as young as 24, and youth interns in middle school and high school who make art for us, who go table with us. And so we're really more about getting back to our roots and talking to our native communities and just like, let's have fun with this. Abortion and sex and all of these things that have been taboo since colonizers got here, they actually weren't taboo. And so part of what we're doing is also participating in Apache culture classes where my own medicine woman from my puberty ceremony is leading a class in Mescalero talking about the four life cycles: baby and all of the traditional things that we're supposed to do, teenagers in puberty, adults, and elders. And so all of the different responsibilities we have in our different life cycles. And I mean, things like that, right? Like essentially it comes down to sex and staying safe. And I'm actually really excited that we have an opportunity now to show how creativity and art can change people's minds and poke fun. And really, the snowflakes are the GOP.
Yeah, can you imagine? Can you imagine if the new quote unquote normal is feeling supported at every stage of your life? To not only first, I feel it starts with yourself, but like attuning to your own self, unique feelings, energy first, and then also having a community that supports you through those different life stages and attunes to you. I hear you. I keep chuckling because like you having a blast. I'm reading that as fucking shit up and not giving any fucks, and that's amazing. Recently, I have moved everything away from Meta, so I unfortunately no longer see your posts, but I'm now on Blue Sky and still on LinkedIn, and we'll see how I feel about that. But aside from the gum, is there something recently that you felt extremely passionate about?
So in December, I hired my baby brother, Joshua, to be our policy research associate. And he graduated with honors last year from college and did it with two little babies, like babies, him and his partner. And I was like, you know, some of this work gets really draining. It's infuriating. People will say things that are blatantly untrue. They'll lie about you. They'll get tired of you. They'll have bad attitudes with you. But if you really want to help, especially after the election, he felt really motivated. He was like, I got to do something. And I was like, this work is like not for the weak, but we try to make it fun. And the thing I'm excited about is just how much he's blooming. He does these incredible legislative summaries that are funny and engaging and easy to read, and they're spot on. And he's also a Capricorn. And almost all my planets are in Capricorn, so I get it. And so I'm so excited about this young my little brother, my baby brother, who's a dad, who's very young. He's 24, and just how much passion he has and how much he loves and respects his partner and how he advocates for his daughter, my niece, and how he wants a good life for her and how he wants my nephew to grow up to be a good man who's honorable and respectful. And he's starting to see like how this work is helping him in that way. And it just almost everyone in the org, we're all related somehow except for our abortion fund director, but we still treat her like family. Like she's still part of this thing. And it's not like, I don't know if you've ever seen the meme where it's like toxic workplaces be like, welcome to the family. It really is us as family coming together and having hard conversations about what works and what doesn't work, and telling my brother like, hey, sometimes we have to have hard conversations and you might get feedback that you don't like. We don't believe in brutal honesty. That's just cruel. You don't have to be cruel and mean in order to give honest feedback. It can be loving and compassionate. And these are the ways that we do that. And he and I grew up in a interesting household. I'm actually estranged from my mom for 4 or 5 years now. And so, being a parent myself, how do I want to show up for my kids and as a manager, as a boss, as an executive, and be that example to my brother? Like, it doesn't have to be brutal or cruel. We always grew up hearing it's a cruel world out there. It doesn't have to be. We can be the tenderness and we can be the honesty. And I've already seen how each of the staff have gone through that cycle. It's so beautiful to see. This work is so much deeper than abortion access, which is what we're primarily known for.
Thank you for that of itself. I mean, I'm in Illinois, notorious blue state, but and we don't know where it's going to go. So I love the work that you're doing. I launched a newsletter recently called The Lighthouse, finding your lighthouse in yourself. Everything outside of you can feel and create such, it's meant to knock you off your center. So take it back, go back in the lighthouse, find within your energy centers, where is your personal light? And understand that it doesn't need to feel the same every day. Some days you're going to be knocked off more than others. Like, for instance, I'm heading into my lateral luteal phase of my menstrual cycle. So it's likely that my warrior is going to come forth in the next few days stronger than my healer. So it'll look different. So just allowing, but finding your own light allows for what I feel the thread from what I feel from you and your work, not that it's the same, but like finding the throughput, the thread of the energetics, that's how we transfer amongst the collective and say, hey, listen, they're going to do what they're going to do. And we get to still stand in our light, any degree that looks like every day. And oh, by the way, if that looks like pulling the covers over your head for a full day or like having a couch day, awesome, awesome. Trust that the human next to you has your back for that day and they're going to stand up, right? So thank you.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And also we have an unlimited PTO policy within our work. And I let folks know, yeah, I personally get really excited. And I'm like, I want this done like by the end of the day or by the end of the week. And I always have to like rein myself back in and be like, all of us in the org are parents and all of our children are small. So we don't always have the time or the capacity to like crank out different things right away. And so I always remind my staff, as much as I get excited about something, please know it's not urgent. And it's okay to push back and be like, actually, a more reasonable timeline is X. And like, I'm not going to take it personally. It's because you know what your needs are. Everything is flexible, everything can be shifted. We're running on Indian time, and time is also a colonial construct. We go by seasons and plant cycles rather than months, right? Traditionally. And so sometimes there will be ceremonies that totally interrupt our travel plans for work. And that's okay because those opportunities, we know they'll come up again. Maybe not the same one, but every chance that each of us take to rest, to be a couch potato, to participate in ceremony. I'm not one of those bosses who's like, okay, an hour lunch and then you got to come back. Take as long as of a lunch as you need because there might be something else going on that you need to process or help your children through. I don't know all of that, but the biggest thing is like let's stay in communication. And something I notice with a lot of folks is emotional immaturity and the inability to communicate what your needs are. And then it turns into passive aggressiveness. And then it turns into those bad vibes that make other people sick and make you sick.
Yep. 8-time workplace abuse survivor over here. So I get it. As we start to wind down, Rachel, whether it be from a standpoint of your Native people or from Indigenous Women Rising around abortion rights, reproductive sovereignty, any of those, what are like the top things that you want non-Indigenous people to know? If there were like main things, use this moment to say the things.
I really encourage folks to please take care of yourselves however you can. I think more people than not are severely dehydrated, and yes, take a drink of water. People just need more time, taking time to stretch, to be outside, to literally go touch grass, because not taking care of yourself means you're not able to take care of other people, and it means that you're not able to show up at work or for the projects that you're really passionate about 100%. And right now in this political moment, we need each other, Native or not. Like part of our vision of reproductive sovereignty also includes the fact that reproductive sovereignty is for everybody, but it's place based. It means that the folks in a physical geological area should focus on that area because we can think global and act small. It's such a cliche term, but it's cliche for a reason. And I think that When we take care of ourselves, we're able to take care of each other. So, yeah, I would say think global, act small. I also want to give a shout out to nativelands.ca. One of the things I encourage non native folks to do is to go to that map, put in the zip code of wherever you call home, and look at the native territories that steward your land and educate yourself about them, and also educate yourself about your own ancestors. I think there's a lot of commonalities there. And I would also say, not necessarily for non-native folks. I think this should be applicable for everyone. Pick two or three things in the news to care about and only focus on those things. There are experts in every single field. Yes, I absolutely care about trans rights. I'm not trans. I'm not saying I can't care about trans folks, but I know that there are attorneys and activists who are doing everything they can, and my part in the community is speaking up, protecting trans folks in my own tribal community, and knowing that they have unique needs that might not be met, and part of our work is making sure those needs are met, but accepting that we're not experts in everything. And I think that can feel really overwhelming when we try to be experts in everything in the news, in all of these different things that we care about. But it's really for our own well-being to not let ourselves be consumed, because we really need joy and we need cohesion right now. And the only way we can do that is if we're not overwhelmed, not burned out, and not dehydrated.
If we're focused on everything, it's hard to focus on anything. That's a huge part of self-care right now, is literally filtering for yourself of what you're consuming on every facet. So, Rachel, where can we find you and support your work?
Yes, we have our website, iwrising.org. We're on Instagram and Facebook. People can also email us, info@iwrising.org. Donation links are open 24/7. We're about to launch Fund a Thong. I learned how to sew thongs at a workshop. So if you donate to Fund a Thong, you might get a handmade lace panty from me.
Wow. Oh my gosh, I feel called to share this with you. Do you know that the average width of women's underwear is 1.8 inches, but the average width of a vulva is 2.5?
Really?
So we've been walking around, those with vulvas, have been walking around forever with like ill-fitting undergarments. A former guest of Women Making Moves created a line of underwear that's actually the width of the average vulva. So closing remarks as we wrap up.
I hope that people who listen to this feel a little more at ease knowing that there are things we can do even in what we think are dark times. I mean, these are dark times, and there's still absolutely a way to find joy and take care of each other. It's not all doom and gloom. And I hope that people feel like not only is there hope, but there's a place for everyone to feel joy and feel connected. And yeah, these political things are scary, but what's scarier is not seeing you have a community around you who cares about you.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, thank you so much.